Hi everybody, thanks for coming. So my entire time at the Tomkins County SPCA, I've been doing humane education, and I had no background in education at all. I think I got the assignment originally because I was the only staff member that had a child. So, but over the years, it's been a lot of fun. I really like to work with kids. We do humane education, I think, in shelters every day with adults. When we do adoptions, when we take in animals, when we do cruelty investigations, but this one's going to focus basically on kids of different ages and different programs that we provide or things you can think about if you're interested in starting a humane education program. So humane education is defined as the use of education to nurture compassion and respect for living things. So you might be asking, well, why would we have a humane education program? Well, one good reason is that children are our future, and it's best if we can influence them at any point that we can. And there's lots of different avenues to reach kids. We all know that kids are tech savvy beyond belief now. But sometimes it's best to go back, I think, to the basic values of morals and, treating others and animals with respect. So that's what we try to focus on our program, and not so much digital things. So things to consider if you're thinking of starting a humane education program or maybe expanding what you're doing is, like we said, investment in the future. It's a good way to see, you may not see the results, but I'm hoping somewhere along the line. And I've experienced it with kids that we reached in different ways at the shelter or in different presentations or through our summer camp program. And they come back and maybe they start volunteering or they do a food drive for us, or in some way the message got through to them. So it's certainly worthwhile doing just to help animals in the future and shelters in the future and people. There are benefits to be had in the now. Lots of times with kids they'll do fundraising for you. Penny drives are really popular. You can get cans that they can decorate that they love, and that's pretty easy for them to do. Or they might have a supply drive like the kids down in the right-hand corner there. That's probably the most popular thing that they like to do, is having supply drives. So the big thing is just to have a list available of everything that they can need, that you need, that there is easy to, for them to collect. And be very specific. If you want bleach, ask for bleach. Not necessarily everybody likes to buy cat and dog food, but there might be things that you need more now. So there can be benefits to the shelter right now. And also, generally, when kids are involved, adults are there as well. And so your message is reaching them, and they may have never been exposed to your messages before. So there's, a cumulative effect with adults, being the guardians of kids, or the, if they're the troop leader for Girl Scouts, or they're the teacher at the school, it all sort of comes around. So again, it can benefit you now as well as in the future. So things to consider before beginning or enhancing your program. One is people power. At our shelter, we've gone through different configurations. We've had a part-time humane education director. We've had myself. I was the outreach coordinator for a while, where we had a more probably vigorous humane education program. So who on your staff, is a people person and doesn't mind children and would be willing to do it. So identifying someone, and sometimes it's a volunteer, but you just have to be sure that they have the message that you want to put out, and that there is somebody experienced in doing the presentations to show them the ropes. And there's a time investment. You may be going to a classroom of first graders where the presentation will take a half an hour, but I can guarantee you the whole thing will take 2, because you're preparing your presentation, you're traveling there. It always takes longer because there's always questions and stories that they want to share with you. And so you have to kind of figure that it's longer than the time it just takes to do it, especially if you're going off-site, which a lot of time is where the requests come in. And also, do you have a place to provide that at the shelter? And again, is traveling an option? Do you want to take the show on the road, or do you want to have it be where you maybe have a workshop where kids come to you? And then one thing we really try to focus on is how at the shelter our Humane Education program supports our mission. So even though there's a broad base of topics you could cover in Humane Education, things like farm animals or animals in entertainment, you have to sort of figure what would be the best benefit now, especially if you consider that there are adults and other people involved in the program. So we always try to focus on overpopulation or care of your pets for younger kids, or winter care or summer care of your pets, and those kind of things that directly affect us. But you can certainly go in different directions, but we're trying to actually bring it back into the interest into the SPCA. And then if you want to use live animals or not. A lot of schools have regulations about having live animals in there, mostly because of allergies. Some don't. I don't know about the populations at your shelter, but we don't always have dogs that we would feel comfortable taking into a room full of kids when there's 30 of them clamoring to say hi. So you may have an animal that a staff member has that you feel comfortable with. You have to be really comfortable with that. The guy in the picture is Gabriel. He's my dog. He's probably done at least 200 visits in his 10 years. And he's the only dog I know that I can take in, and if 30 kids swarm him and hug him, that he's okay. And we used to do an event at a local putt-putt golf course that they had an Easter egg hunt, and probably 2,000 kids attended. And he let every single kid hug him and give him a treat. And when we went home that night, he laid on the car seat and his head just flumped over. So you really have to have an animal. Kittens are usually pretty safe if you're in control of them. I wouldn't, letting them run around the room is certainly a disaster. And actually having the kids hold them is too stressful. And puppies the same way. But adult animals, you really got to know who you're taking, because you don't want to have any kind of adverse thing happen. So if you're, again, using a staff member's dog or a volunteer dog, I would say that they would have to have some training and some evaluation before you took them. Because we all know sometimes we think, just like our kids, that our dogs are a little better than others. So now we can talk a little bit about different programs for different ages. So my favorite is preschool. They're so cute. But so different things on here are, besides a bunch of cute pictures of toddlers and dogs, the 3 books that I listed are ones that I routinely use that I really recommend. They're all available on Amazon, not too expensive. Buddy Unchained, if you've never read it, is a story about a dog that had a terrible life on the end of a chain. It's very sad. His feet are sore and he doesn't have any food. And then he gets rescued by the animal control officer, brought back to the shelter, and then placed in a new home. So the Before You Were Mine is a book about a family that's just adopted a dog, trying to figure out what his life was like before. But I will warn you, I can never get through the part where he talks about how their old dog died and then they got the new puppy. So you have to be stoic to read that one. And then another good one is just for preschoolers, May I Pet Your Dog? It's very, very simple. Talks about, approaching the owner and asking and letting them sniff their hand and not hugging them or grabbing them or other things kids love to do. So some of the ideas are you can hook up with your local libraries for a preschool hour. Almost all of them have them monthly. I've been to a lot of them where sometimes I used the library books and we talked about hamsters and found storybooks about hamsters. I used to have a great hamster that could actually go to preschool and be petted by kids. But usually they're very happy to have someone else come in and offer to speak to the kids. Or and then again, you have to judge whether you want to bring an animal or not. But with preschoolers, you don't really have to. Bring some stuffed dogs. They like that just as much. Also, we do a lot of visits to daycare centers. Just a very, very simple presentation about kids and taking care of dogs and cats. And you'll get tons of stories and learn a whole lot about how they take care of their pets at home. And then just stock a shelter library with some of these books. Or again, if you go on Amazon, I was amazed at how many books there are that really are specifically speak to the kind of work we do in a preschool or elementary school level that really are worthwhile. It's also something someone might think about donating to their local library at their elementary school, or trying to, because I've yet to find any of these books at the libraries that I visited. So, and then simple pet care usually makes the best topic. No need to be, there's a lot of information on the web about making a felt board where you have the dog and the cat and then things they need, and then kids can come up and pick that up and put it on the felt board. Often we just use a cat carrier, and we put in there things that you'd want them to know about. So there's a brush, there's dog and cat food, there's a bed, and all those things that we can talk about how the dog or cat needs their own space, you know, what happens when they get matted and that it hurts them. Just really simple things. It's really easy to put together, have a toy in there, and then usually I throw in a heart or something to show that they need love, and then we talk about why they need love every day and they're not your video game that you can just put away. So, okay. And then the next is school age kids, which I think is what a lot of people think about for humane education, is going into the schools. So one thing that's a good idea is to learn about your school districts. Everybody operates differently, even within Tomkins County, like the more rural school districts will operate differently than the city of Ithaca. So learn how, you know, to go about reaching to the teachers, because that's who you want to talk to. We've had just really good luck with writing letters specifically to the teachers. All that information is online now, because all the parents check on it. So you can find out what teachers teach what age groups, and just send them a letter, tell them you're interested in visiting, and we'll look at a sample letter in a second. So they're, you know, just a simple letter requesting to get in, and, you know, you'll probably send maybe 30 letters, and 5 teachers will respond because they're really busy and overworked, and just, you know, with all their regulations, they may not have a lot of extra time. But there's always some teachers that are really interested in the topic and having someone come in. And the best advice I can give is to pick a grade. You can do a different grade each year, but trying to reach every kid in every grade in every school district is an impossible task. So what we try to do when we've had school presentations is pick a grade and then follow that grade. So if we pick first graders, then the next year we offer it to second graders and third graders and follow them up the line with different presentations, but then you're sending the message more than once to each child. So, but again, trying to have, you know, 6 different presentations to do first through 6th grade is crazy.
So you find it's more helpful to follow those same kids as they age rather than stick with first graders every year, get the same presentation, that way as they age up, the new kids are learning?
I think it could be either way. I mean, I think that the general feeling is it's best to reach the kid as many times as you can. So if you're following the age group, you know, you can, and then you have to decide, you know, what's the cutoff? What are you most interested in doing? Grade schools or middle schools or high schools? So, but it could be either way, but I think people recommend the more you can expose them. You can also do teacher workshops if there's any interest in your area. That would be something you have to go through the school district for, and, you know, provide them with information that you think may, you know, should be presented into their age group, and then they can either, you know, use it or not. But that's another way to reach more kids. If you can get the teachers on board to incorporating it in their curriculum, you'll be a lot better success. But we've had them before, and there just wasn't a big response for it. So we went back to visiting into the schools. And again, offering a specific presentation. When I first started, I would go in and ramble on and on about the SPCA, which when you're in 3rd grade, it's right over your head. But if you offer a presentation or, you know, some activity where it's interactive, it works a lot better, and they'll pay a lot more attention than just someone talking to them, which is pretty much true of adults too. In humane education, is it a requirement in your state? In New York State it is, but teachers can fulfill it. So they just have to build some kind of humane education message into their own curriculum. So they don't have to provide it outside of the classroom, you know, through a visitor from a shelter. It might vary in different states, so I would check that. We always mention it when we would solicit to come into the schools and say, this could help you meet your humane education requirement. But there's no way to really force them to do it that way. Okay, this is a sample letter that we sent out a few years ago. We talked about what the problem was for the shelter, and then, we made a point of offering to students the opportunity to do our presentation, and that, that there was no cost to it, but we encouraged them to do donations. And with this letter, we probably did about 25 presentations across the county. And this was one of my favorite things that we do. The idea came, there's a lot of information. If you Google Humane Education, you'll find tons of information on different programs. This came from, I kind of varied a program that was offered by the MSPCA in Massachusetts. But it's just simply a black and white picture of cats that are numbered on the back 1 to 53. And the kids would be able to color the cats. And then we would read a story about how one cat, you got a kitty, the first kid got to name the kitty, and then it was, this kitty has kittens, and then that cat has more kittens, and the kittens have kittens, and eventually it shows them how one cat can become 53 in a year. And where it really makes the impact is it's all on one piece of foam board, so 53 cat pictures don't fit on the piece of foam board. So suddenly you're covering little Fluffy, and then it gives you a chance to talk about, how would you care for 53 cats? And you can talk about if you had cases where you took in 53 cats. And they're pretty smart with that. They realize pretty quick that doesn't work out really well. So that's one of my favorite. The other big part of my job is the spay and neuter program, so when I can combine the two, I'm really happy. So it's kind of a sample letter to give you an idea. So other ideas for school-age kids are tours of the shelter. Does anybody do tours now of their shelter? It can be challenging sometimes, depending on who you have and how many kids. So I'm learning over the course of time that 30 kids at the shelter for a tour doesn't really work out really well. And again, our population isn't always kid-friendly or 30 kid-friendly. So you sort of have to judge at our shelter we have a lot of rooms, and letting them have access to all the rooms is sort of what I like to say fraught with peril. So we try to bring the animals out to them that we think would be a good match. And I try to limit it to not more than 15 kids. If it's more than that, I try to find a volunteer to do the other end of it. And what's the best day and time for you? And it's also a very nice idea. We ran into some volunteers were sort of reluctant to do the tours because it can be disruptive, and when 30 kids are coming through the shelter, it can be hard for everybody. But we really feel that it would not be in our best interest to not do tours, so we just have to try to manage it in a different way, and we always try to let the volunteers know and the staff know when we're doing them, so everybody can prepare. And if you're scared of 7-year-olds, you can go hide in the bathroom. And Girl Scout and Boy Scout groups. Girl Scouts, we actually had a lot of requests for tours, and then they wanted to do a more in-depth program with us, so we started offering a Girl Scout workshop that results in a fun animal shelter badge. And then we started charging for it and expanding it a little bit. So we do Girl Scout workshops on Saturdays. It's like an hour and a half. They come in, they do the crate with the supplies in it. They make some toys for the cats. They learn about dog body language, and they meet a dog, and then they do a tour of the shelter. We just charge $10 per child and $10 for any siblings that are 5 or over. And that's worked really well. It's pretty successful. We probably do maybe one a month in the wintertime. And Boy Scouts have been really good about wanting to make or do collection drives or make dog bandanas or something else for the dogs. Easy ideas for kids, or if you can braid pieces of felt together, long pieces of felt that can be 2 tug toys for dogs, and then the ever popular pom-pom cat toys, which are easy to do. And then sometimes groups make dog cookies, not with us, but off-site, and give them to the animals. So those are all projects that kids can do. There's lots of information on the internet too about different things that you can get kids to do. We also We do a version of Kongs at the shelter where we use egg cartons, cardboard egg cartons. The dogs don't seem to chew those up, but they're not as hard to clean as Kongs. And that's a great activity for kids if they don't overstuff them, which is hard. You got to monitor them, but that one I've used a lot. And it's just nice after the tour, because for us a tour doesn't really take that long because they're not available. You know, they can't really visit every animal. So if you can provide an activity for them afterwards, if you have a place to take them, it'll engage them more. Plus you can have them make posters for animals at the shelter. Use pictures that you have. They love that. 4-H groups. We just had a 4-H group this winter that made, it was a sewing 4-H group, and they sewed bandanas for our dogs with Velcro on them. And they went home with the dogs that were adopted. So that was great. Is my boss in here? Birthday parties. I personally have not wanted to go there. We had 2. And we had a dog that was not good with kids, that the birthday girl insisted it was her birthday and she should go in and hug that dog. She didn't get to, but I mean, if you have volunteers, I guarantee you offer this, you would be busy every weekend day, because we get lots of requests for it. You could charge for it, you know, depending on where you want to go. You want to rent the room. You can do a humane education presentation. We've done them, but since I didn't really want to work every weekend for the rest of my life, I haven't really pushed it, but it's certainly an option. I don't know of any shelters that actually do that. Lots of other organizations do, because I think it's hard, because you'd have to make that break that they couldn't visit with all the animals, and that's probably what they'd be expecting. So that is one thing I'd suggest too when you're setting these things up, is to be very clear with who you're talking to, with what you're going to offer. When I offer a tour, we get a lot of requests for, you know, I have a group of, you know, 7th graders and they want to come in and volunteer for the day. Well, we don't have staff or volunteers to monitor 7th graders, and we don't really have anything for them to do, so those requests come to me and I sort of gear them into a tour and then an activity. But I'm very clear with why. I explain to the teacher or whoever's asking why we can't do that, because it's just not beneficial usually for the shelter. It's just a lot of time, and it's not really safe for them. So we try to divert, and a tour is a thing to offer as a compromise, basically. But I'm very clear with what we're offering. And then summer camps, we're going to talk more in depth about that in a minute, but that's certainly for school-age kids. And then reading to shelter pets. It's a very popular program now. Anybody do that at their shelter? Great. And then another idea is dog safety programs. Kelly Bolin, we were lucky that she lived here when camp started for us, and she developed some programs for us that were specific to dog safety. And I think that's actually something you could provide like on a Saturday and charge for it. Parents would be interested in having their kids come and learn body language and you know, how to prevent bites. So, okay. So ideas for middle and high schoolers, a little more challenging. Volunteering, depending on your age restrictions. At the SPCA of Tomkins County, we take volunteers, Kat will correct me, 12 to 15 with a guardian, usually a parent. It could be a grandparent or an older sister that's 18. And then 16 to 18, they can volunteer with the cats by themselves, and they can't volunteer with the dogs until they're 18, whether their parents with them or not. And that's pretty much based on what our liability insurance says. So, but depending on, you know, where you are, you can get, again, not a babysitting service. We've had parents that wanted to drop them off every day in the summer, but we said no. So, and after school clubs, we had a board member at one time that was a teacher at a local high school, and we had an after school club, and we started it there, and we met once a month, and in that venue we were able to talk about all kinds of topics. We, of course, covered the shelter and tried to get them to do, you know, a supply drive or fundraising, but we also talked about animals and entertainment and farm animals and research animals and all different kinds of things. So if you have an ongoing thing like that, it's easier to start dabbling in other topics and, you know, at least informing them that other issues are out there. Or I visited a lot of after-school clubs, math clubs and science clubs. Everybody kind of puts it together. And summer camp junior counselors, well, again, we'll talk a little bit more about that during the summer camp session, but that's certainly some way to use middle or high schoolers. The only thing I can say about camp counselors, and I learned from experience, is you do not want them close to the age of the campers, because making them have that separation between being a camper and being a helpful counselor is hard if your campers end at 12 and they're 13. So I would put a few years between them. And then we've had kids volunteer specifically for the Humane Education program. You know, the younger the kid, the more they relate to the younger the person. So, you know, high schoolers can certainly, you know, read to young kids, and it'll be really popular. And so, you know, if you have high schoolers that are interested in helping and they're like you know, they want to work with dogs, but they have to wait until they're 18 with us, that might be, you know, we have an annex, like a satellite shelter at the mall, and we used to have a story time there, and sometimes would use teenagers to do the reading. So, and then older Girl or Boy Scout service projects, cadets or Eagle Scouts, I think have done food drives for us for feral cats. They've come up with, you know, working on adoption packets. That one hasn't come through yet, but they're working on it. But, you know, they're often looking for service projects, and it's a good way to utilize them. And they'll usually contact you about it. You don't really have to reach out to them too much. Thanks. So, Camp SPCA is something that we started 11 years ago. And I got to tell you, I didn't know it was going to go for 11 years. When the director was there at the time, I said, you can have 10 years, and then I'll be almost 60. We're on year 11. It's been highly successful for us, and generally a lot of fun. So why you would have a summer camp program? It is a unique humane education opportunity. It's sort of the same thing we were talking about after school clubs. It allows you to go and expand what you're doing in your message in different directions. So we use it as an opportunity to talk about other animal issues, you know, and get them thinking about other things that go on. And we actually had never visited a zoo before. It's sort of kind of mixed feelings about going to the zoo, as I think a lot of animal people do. But we had an opportunity to go last year, and we did. It was very interesting because we did a presentation about, you know, what happens at zoos and what zoos need. The same kind of thing when we talk about enrichment for our animals. They need a place to hide, they need water. And so we took them to the zoo thinking that this was a good zoo, and they came back with a list of things that were wrong. And I was like, well, you were listening, that was great. But unfortunately, they took it out on the woman in the gift shop. So, you know, it was good. I mean, it was hard to figure out whether to go again because I didn't want to traumatize them, but I was really proud of them that they remembered. So there's a few times in summer camps like, whoa, you were listening. So, but at least now they'll go to zoos and circuses or whatever with open eyes. So you also create little ambassadors for your mission. We'll talk a little bit specifics about our camp, but basically it's a middle-aged camp. These kids are also going to sailor camp, and they're going to primitive pursuits. But they can be little ambassadors to take your mission back to other kids that might not be able to go. Or when they go to school and you know, little Johnny's friend has a litter of kittens, they'll be able to talk about what they learned about at camp and maybe make a difference. So it does make money. If you do it right, you don't make a ton of money, but you should make some money on it. Depending on how many kids you have, how many counselors you have. You know, for us at the shelter, we do the registrations on March 1st, and like most shelters and nonprofits, I think the first few months of the year are leaner because you just got done with all the Christmas donations. And so it actually provides some money at a time when we really need it. But, you know, depending on how much you want to expand the program, you know, and what you want to do with it, we'll talk a little bit about other ways to fund it in a minute. And it gives the rest of your staff something to worry about. And you should know you'll never see the inside of your bathroom for the summer. That's the biggest complaint, but I'm lucky to work with a lot of people who are very supportive of it. I've talked to other people that had camp programs, and nobody on the staff likes kids, nobody wants. So I get a lot of ribbing about it, but basically everybody's really good about it, including the two people up here. So things to consider before diving into one. Do you have a designated space? You got to put them somewhere, and not in your lobby, preferably. What age kids do you want to do? You need a director, somebody in charge of it, and to interface with the parents. And then how many kids do you want, versus the counselor, and do you want the director to be one of the counselors, or can that be someone who's not? I no longer am, just because I got a different position and had more responsibilities other than camp. But I oversee the program. And how many number of weeks? We started with two weeks, but the demand was so high we added a week. And now we're up to 8 weeks. And that's about all we can do because the counselors are in college and they have to go back to school. So we started with 10 kids, we're up to 20 now. So it's grown over the course of the years. Ages of kids and how you want to do that, it will affect how many curriculums you have to have. We stick to 9 to 12-year-olds. We don't vary there, only occasionally for somebody who's really good to the shelter might get their 8.5-year-old in. But generally, that's the age we do. We're able to offer, that they don't come more than 1 week, so we can reach as many kids as possible. And we don't have to change the curriculum every week. And hours, and before and after care. Ours is 9 to 3, no before, no after care. Mostly because we have to use the room for other things. But also then you're having to pay counselors to stay later to be with them and come up with even more activities for them to do between 3 and 5. So most of the time, parents work it out and they go with the hours we have. Do they attend 1 week, or are you going to vary the curriculum and let them go? Like our nature center offers like reptile week and forest week, and so kids can go all summer there. We really weren't interested in providing that kind of care for kids. It was more like we wanted to give them a solid educational experience for 1 week and then move on to the next kids. And registration fees, do you want to give a discount within family? Are scholarships available, and field trips? So our registration fee is $250, and it's been that for 8 years, I think. 7 or 8 years. It started at $200, then it went to $225, and then went to $250, and it stayed there. And we don't offer any discount for siblings. We don't look at Camp SPCA has, something every kid is going to be able to attend. So it is, it does have to pay for itself, and all the things are provided to every kid attending. So we don't usually offer. We, like I said, do 8 weeks. We start the week after school ends and then run through August 18th this year. 9 to 12, 9 to 3. Year-to-year repeaters are welcome, so I have a lot of kids. My counselor I have went through 4 years of camp, volunteered a year, and now has been employed by us. So, I get probably 35% of the campers that come are repeaters. So, and a lot of times the curriculum hasn't varied a lot, but they seem to be okay with that. Each child just attends 1 week. We've had scholarships in the past that were given by foundations. We do 5 field trips in 5 days, so we're really busy. It's just evolved into a field trip camp. You definitely don't have to do that. But you do have to provide something for them to do between 9 and 3, and it's hard at shelters to find the physical activity they need. They go to soccer camp or sailing camp or basketball camp. They're out running around and doing things. So the first few years we didn't go on any field trips, and that was really difficult because they were antsy. We have various speakers come in, and the kids provide their own lunch, and we just provide a snack in the afternoon, something healthy. We have a bus. We rent the bus from the Ithaca City School. So you do need permission slips. You want emergency contact information on those. I think these are all going to be available too through Maddie's fund. They copied my my PowerPoint thing. It's really hot in here. Any medical conditions or allergies. The challenge we had last year is we had a girl who was a vegan and gluten-free. So the usual snacks were out, but we managed to do that. We get a lot of kids, which is great, that are vegans, so we always have those snacks on hand. Permission to provide medical treatment in an emergency, that's really important. A modeling release so we can use their pictures, like in these PowerPoints. And we let them watch a spay and neuter surgery. And so, because Dr. Brolinger is just swell and her team that work with us. But we always have them sign off because there's always a fainter in the group. And if you're not right behind them, the counselors try to stand behind all of them. We caught one kid last Friday. And permission to go on the field trips. So busy, busy, busy. Very important. Keep them busy. This is Dr. Appel's daughter. And that's a baby alligator she's holding. So we've had Greyhound Rescue come. They come every year, bring a couple laid-back greyhounds, talk about greyhound racing. We've had different breed rescue come. One time the breed rescue brought his own golden retriever that wasn't neutered, so that was awkward. So you might want to mention that. Why isn't that dog neutered? They all said. Like, okay, not our dog.
Again, they were paying attention.
Police dogs that they usually can't touch. Therapy dogs, we have Cornell companions in this area, and they do a lot of visitation, and they will bring their dogs. Guiding Eyes for the Blind, Kat, our wonderful employee, has a Guiding Eye puppy, so she's been coming in talking about Guiding Eyes. And a couple weeks ago, we had a very funny week where they were very fixated on what would happen if the dog was blind. And we were like, well, what if the dog was deaf? What if the dog had 3 legs? Like, we don't think we'd give that dog to a blind person. But it was a long conversation, wasn't it? Reptiles, we have a guy called Dan the Snake Man that comes, and he's great because he gears his presentation to why people should not have reptiles themselves if they can't care for them, and why venomous snakes are bad, and you should not have them. Obedience and agility demonstrations, they love that. Animal control officers can come and talk about their job and show a catch pole, show a trap and gloves, and sound very exciting. Development staff, we have Kat also comes and does. We have a March for Animals in October, so we come and she plays a game with them where they get a certain amount of money, sort of like Monopoly, and then they get an animal's picture, and they have to figure out if they have enough money to pay for that care of their animal. Some do, and then the one that needs a dental, they don't, and then then we get a chance to talk about, well, what would we do? Do we not do the dental? Do we, just send the cat home with bad teeth? Or we could raise money, and then we go into our march and give them a can and hope they raise something. And the adoption staff could come and talk about how they make decisions and what's important to think about before you get a pet. And then we have PowerPoints on dog safety, and also we talk about the history of the humane movement. Every child that leaves my place knows all about Henry Berg. And they're crafty, so stock up on stickers. We've painted flower pots and planted catnip in them. They usually paint a picture frame for their pet. They can sew catnip pillows if you have someone watching that they don't sew their finger. We painted dog leashes, yarn pom-poms for cats. We give them a t-shirt that they tie-dye. We've been tie-dyeing for, I think, 9 years, and every time I'm like a little done with tie-dye, it was a product of the 60s. They love to tie-dye, so that's a great activity for them, and then everybody's shirts look unique, and they're pretty happy. And and we give them a notebook and a pen so they can record, and some of them are really good about recording a diary of their camp experience. So thoughts about field trips. Who's driving? In the beginning, we drove them ourselves. We would never do that again. My current boss came and said, "What are you doing? Get a bus." So we rent the Ithaca City school bus and driver to take us. How far do you want to go? We've expanded. I always wanted to take them to Farm Sanctuary, and then when we got a bus, we started to go there, which is, 45 minutes from us, I think. And I try to pick destinations related to the mission or other. So we visit a horse rescue farm who's comparable to what we do with dogs and cats. And we go to Cuga Nature Center, and they do another presentation on animals they have there that were pets that were given up to the Nature Center. So trying to focus on something that's related to the mission still. It's costly, but I think it's worth it. It gets them out, they're active, and everybody talks about it, and I think that's why we have so many kids come back. And the nice thing about camp is a lot of times we've had luck in soliciting community funding. So, some grantors who won't fund your shelter operations or building projects will fund something like camp because it lets them you know, it's a people program first and foremost, and then the animals. And so why we've been able to keep the tuition where we have been is by getting grantors to fund like the bus or the field trip, you know, fees. So that, and you know, we tell them we're doing it so we can keep the fee down so more and more kids can attend. The places we've been to alpaca farms and goat farms. That's not totally related to the mission, but we usually check them out and make sure there's nothing horrendous going on there. Alpaca farms, it's hard. Alpacas are shy. They don't really want to be petted. But the goat farm we're going to now has lots of baby goats. Dog agility demonstrations, we always try to, you know, if you have a nature center or a wildlife rehab center, you know, that would be great to show them. And my personal favorite is Farm Sanctuary, just because they show a short movie that I do have to warn parents about. It's a little graphic, but not to make every kid a vegan, but just to expose them, because I believe in issues like farm animals, the change will come from legislation, from people being aware of what's happening. And so they go to Farm Sanctuary, they watch the short video, and then like the little girl in the middle there, you get to pet a pig. Or you stand outside with a cow. And they meet, you know, they hear those animal stories and they know what happened to them, and then they see the life they're living now. So, and like I said, many kids, lots of them are interested in veterinary medicine, so we let them observe a spay or neuter surgery. And I'll tell you, like out of 20, 18 will go to watch the surgery, 5 will make it through the end. If we're lucky, no one gets sick or faints. That's a good day. Be sure to get the parents' permission for that. And then they also examine animals, usually kittens, and they listen to their heart, and they let them give them a little bit of wormer, and they inject the microchip, and then they look at the microchip scanner. So if you have a veterinary program at your shelter, it's made for this. You can see all the little happy faces. No, it's been a great thing for the shelter, and really, sometimes they just make you so proud because they learned something. Thanks so much. I'm not used to this. I usually talk to smaller, younger, shorter groups.